What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for joining us on the Leaders Unfiltered podcast, the podcast that is aiming to uncover real workforce insights all through raw and unfiltered dialogue with some of the leaders within our unique ecosystem. I am your host on today's episode, Angela Alberty, and if you're tuning in, we want to thank you. You're one of our first listeners that are supporting the show as we kicked off in 2025. And what an exciting show we have lined up for you guys. Pratik Patel with Mastercard is going to be joining us. And really the scope of today's episode is going to be overarching, and I would consider it three major concepts in the contingent workforce industry. A lot of that is understanding your data and utilizing it to the advantage within different stakeholders in your program. Definitely going to be talking more about stakeholder alignment and what to do in various scenarios, and then sustainability and how that carries through with some real live examples within the Mastercard program all the way down to the supplier level. So Pratik, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you on. Can you spend the first couple of minutes just going over who you are? I think a lot of the folks in the industry know who you are, but we'd love to get that elevator pitch on Pratik Patel.
Yeah, Angela, first off, thanks so much for having me on this program. I hope that we continue to inspire people with what we have to share, and maybe even give them some nuggets of new areas for them to really be focused, because I hope what we're going to talk about today is really going to be meaningful and impactful for people in their own respective areas. So I'm Pratik Patel. I've been with Mastercard for almost 7 years now. I have 5 categories that I manage in the company, including tech services, temporary workforce, contact center, what we do with data and AI, and optimize the spend, optimize the suppliers, and be a consulting arm to the business for the right supplier for the right need. And I also have 7 divisions in technology for anything over $500,000. So holistically, that gives me a deep understanding of what our objectives are as a company and how we can align our suppliers to those needs.
Awesome. Well, there's quite a bit that you can share in terms of insights, and I love the objective here that we have to inspire and let others relate to some complex subject matter. And I think a great way that we could kick things off is talking through data utilization and machine learning. And as somebody that is not familiar with technology, when I first heard the concept of machine learning, I was like, what the heck is that? There's no way. But I think what we can walk away, and just having spoken with you for a couple of minutes leading up to today's call, is that this is super relatable. Everyone that is not on board, get ready to get on board. But I really wanted to kick it off with utilizing those data insights. And if you could give us some examples of how you are utilizing machine learning to support business processes, especially when it comes to some decision makings or perhaps escalation, some operational procedural support, anything when it relative to that is really where we wanted to kick off today's episode. So take it away. Let us know your thoughts on data utilization, how your team is doing it, and the machine learning concept come to life.
Yeah, so I think you have to look at this in terms of a crawl, walk, run approach. Where crawling, you're just trying to understand data that you have available. Yeah. And the example that I want to utilize is when you look at just purely on the SOW side of the business from a time and material engagement. Because if you don't have a centralized system, and thankfully today we do, we have a VMS that we manage a lot of our data in today. But if we don't have that, you really have to go SOW by SOW to get the data. So the first component is just getting the data. And it doesn't have to be any big system. You have to extract data from your existing P2P system to be able to do it and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to do that. And I don't think it's necessarily going to give you what you need even when you do that. Instead, it should be a grounds-root effort from my perspective. You define what are the different elements you need to be able to capture. What are the fields? For example, with time and material, you want to know job role, job level, rates, the rates that you're paying, the location that's in, maybe the business that is utilizing those resources, some common things like that. So about six years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I went down on that journey with just some discretionary funds that we had, and we used cost arbitrage. We used a low-cost country And we had 3 people in these low-cost country for about 2 months that did about 15 things for me in those 2 months. And one of those was to go and get data from all of our suppliers to fill out this template so that we truly have an understanding of what do we have across our ecosystem. And we found that we had a tremendous amount of complexity, hundreds, I'll just say, of job role, job level combinations for thousands of people. And so that was way too much. Like, for example, software engineer was programmer, developer. There's lots of different terminology for a software engineer, software developer, software engineer. I mean, there's a lot of different components to that. And so you have to think about how you normalize that data. How do you standardize that? And so how you start with this is just having the data. So that's the first piece, is the crawl. Then the walk is now, what do you do with that data? So now you have the data. Now you want to be able to better understand how you can continue to have good data, because you took the effort to be able to collect the data, but now you need to be able to sustain that longer term. And that's where a centralized system comes into play. And you need to be able to convince your leadership of investing in this, and at this point, into a system that you can manage all of these resources in. And so having the data helped us to build the business case. And really, I just use outliers beyond like what an average rate was that we were paying for different job roles, job levels, showing the high level of complexity and the different variations that we had, and being able to show how, if we can standardize that, if we can manage the outliers, the system pays for itself in a sense too. And so then now you have a centralized system for your data. Now you have to look at the run component. And the run component for me now is about minimizing the variability of the data. So over time, you want to be able to see that there's less outliers. There's less deviation in terms of the number of different job role, job level combinations. Today, worldwide, we have 10 job role, job level combinations that make up 70% of our spend. And the reason for that is because we spent a lot of time in truly defining the job descriptions of each of the key levels that we have. And we did it in a way where the business wanted to utilize those job role, those job descriptions as their job descriptions. So we don't deviate from that. And then the rate cards that we have established with our suppliers continues to use that same nomenclature. Yeah. So that's the component from a crawl, walk, run standpoint. But let's talk about it now in terms of how AI and ML and how you can utilize that too. So when you think about it from that perspective, machine learning. So machine learning is just about data relationships and understanding how those data relationships can translate into a predictable outcome. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have some understanding of how those data relationships can be connected. And with Gen AI, we have natural language processing, which is the English language. And it's the machine's interpretation of the English language. So one of the things that I'm doing over this next year is really leveraging a Microsoft product called Copilot, and specifically Copilot Studio, which enables us to build a chatbot for the right supplier for the right need for the business. And in you doing this, what we're finding is when you just use the natural language processing and link it to the data, you face a lot of challenges, because the interpretation of the English language by a machine and the algorithm is not exactly the interpretation of how we look at things. So the example is supplier, for example. You think about supplier, and it's very natural to say, what suppliers provide software development capabilities, for example? And you ask that in the chatbot. And the response is not exactly what you want, because the natural language processing doesn't know what the term supplier means and how that connects to names of suppliers. for example.
Yeah, it's probably
So,
like spitting out something that supplies you with like closet staples or office equipment or something to that extent. There's so many different variations.
yeah, and in this situation, what it did is, and we didn't recognize this, is how we labeled a file of all the suppliers that we have in our VMS system and connecting it to also like how different people at our MSP are supporting for different businesses as well. And that file pulled those businesses, those contacts for those businesses as the supplier.
Gotcha.
So it's training it. And there's something called topics and knowledge inside Custom Copilot, which enable you to be able to do this training. So I don't want to bore your audience, but I think that you start off with having a good understanding of where your gaps are in the data. Then you have a ground roots approach to get the data. You need to get the data. Yeah. And you can just hire some people where they're going to go and contact your supply base. Your supply base is going to be the best source of your data as well. Yeah. They'll go populate that information. The supply base is happily willing to provide it because they want to grow with you as well.
Absolutely. And you know what, I was thinking through some of the things that you were mentioning. You know, we're crawling, we're walking, we're running through this hum of keeping data integrity intact and potentially even teaching and refining this machine learning concept that we want to bring to life through this enriched data. But let's take it like 14 steps back. Let's pretend that we have a listener tuning in that's not even crawling, right? We're learning how to set up, right? There is segmented databases everywhere. There's probably acquisitions that have taken place. There are probably stakeholders that aren't prioritizing this. And then, you know, we have to get through pre-governance, right? So I think when we think through AI and the application of machine learning, a big concept to me in my mind is what are going to be the compliance layers that we apply to this to actually adhere to actually building this into a process, but also through the business practices that the organization wants to uphold. So talk to us about pre-governance, right? And you mentioned some examples of keeping data stable, but any advice for that listener that's you're really just trying to learn how to set up and bring this into life with maybe not the right budget, not the right stakeholders that are prioritized around this, and certainly segmented data from everywhere. And that might require the utilization of more than just a couple of folks to bring this to life, maybe in a lower cost country. What would you say to those listeners?
Yeah. So my first thought, Angela, in that situation is from a process perspective, leveraging lean principles. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much your audience may know about lean, but very briefly, lean is just all about flow, enabling flow to take place. Yeah. And where flow doesn't take place, then waste exists. And then it's all about identifying what that waste is and how to eliminate that waste. So step one in being able to even identify what that flow is a value stream mapping exercise. Yeah. So you should just get the different stakeholders in the room together. Let's understand what is the current state that we have. What's the problem? What are the pain points that we have as well? You should outline all of your pain points that you have across being able to address the problem you're trying to solve. And in this case, the problem you might be trying to solve is having meaningful data that we can make decisions around to optimize spend, optimize our suppliers, and identify the right supplier for the right need. That might be the problem you're trying to solve. I'm sure many are trying to solve that problem.
People are going to want to talk to you about their problem. So it's easy to get folks into a room and just say, give it to me, lay it to me straight. Let's outline where the gaps are that you experience on the day-to-day.
That's right. So start with that. What's the problem you're trying to solve and what the pain points are? And then map out all the different tasks that are involved today. And with those tasks, identify where that waste is existing. What is causing you not to get the data that you need today? Part of it may be that data needs to transfer to a lot of different people or handoffs before it is in a state where you are able to use it. And that is what we call like a spaghetti diagram of like all the different handoffs that data goes through. And each one of those, you have to question whether it's truly needed and what value does that really add? Because we should only be ultimately paying for value-added activities. And good data is something you should be paying for in some way, because your customers are going to be willing to pay for that because of the value they get from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is awesome. I think you gave us a Cole's notes of what it is on the importance behind data and some pre-tips on just the crawl, walk, run analogy. I want to take us to when we met in Atlanta. I had the chance to meet Pratik in Atlanta at the NMSDC conference. And there was a lot that you were talking through about sustainability and how that's an initiative, a top-down initiative at MasterCard. And I was hoping that you could share that, because I found this truly fascinating on what you guys have done when this kind of launched. I think you mentioned it was about 5 years ago, but could you walk us through the sustainability voyage that MasterCard has taken and what you guys are doing in 2025 to drive this even further?
Yeah, I think we all have to really be very much aware that the core temperature of the Earth is increasing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of science that backs this up, that when we get to 1.5% degrees higher, we start to see material changes. I think we're already starting to see that. I mean, you look at how much floods there are out there, like just unbelievable amounts of rain in short periods of time, how strong hurricanes are getting with the ocean temperatures. It's real. And we have to do something about it. I'm so proud of what MasterCard has been doing, because since 2016, MasterCard has been on this journey in terms of improving its ability to reduce its carbon emissions. And that is the core of what sustainability is. Sustainability is about reducing your gas house emissions. And so reducing your gas house emissions ultimately has a direct correlation to the core temperature of the Earth as well. So it's important when you build any type of sustainability program, you clearly align it, because it's not a sustainability program otherwise, to the how it impacts the overall temperature. And so science-based targets are critical to being able to do that. And a science-based target is any metric that you're defining in your program which directly correlates to how it impacts the core temperature of the Earth, so gas house emissions. So from a MasterCard perspective, we started on this journey in 2016. We recognized around 2022, I believe, it's public information out there, maybe it was 2021, where we decided to compensate our executives around meeting our sustainability goals. But I think it only took about a year before the company recognized it's not just about the executives, it's everyone. So everyone is incentivized in the company to be able to meet our sustainability goals, which makes it much, much higher focus and ensures everyone has a rallying cry around it. And as a part of why everyone needs to be a part of this is because there are three components to how you look at sustainability, what we call scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1 is direct emissions. So direct emissions are what you can control specifically. So generator power, renewable energy you might be using in your own environment, but they still emit carbon emissions. It's not like they miraculously appear. To build solar panels, to build windmills, to do anything that's going to allow you to renew and use energy again. And when you use energy again, you have to store the energy. That's battery power too. So you have to kind of think about that aspect. So that's scope 1. Scope 2 is indirect emissions, and specifically from the grid, the electricity that you utilize. And I think I read someplace that 40% of most companies, their carbon emissions is in their buildings. So it's their buildings where the majority of those carbon emissions are. And buildings can be factories too, depending on your industry. So but that's what's driving that. And then scope 3 is everything else. Everything else. That includes your commute, your business travel, your suppliers, and what emissions they have impact on. So MasterCard recognized the importance that everybody needs to rally around this, because for us, 80% of our carbon emissions is from scope 3. And we really need our suppliers to be on board. And we don't want to just be like a company that says, okay, this is an important effort for us. You're going to have to do this. You don't do this, you will not be a supplier to MasterCard anymore. We want to lean in. So we started this more than 2 years ago, at least with contingent workforce suppliers, where we shared about, hey, we need you to be able to get to net zero. So we need you to have a goal. We need you to be able to have science-based targets that this goal is based on. We need you to be able to measure scope 1, scope 2, scope 3% complete. We know this is a journey. It's going to take years, in some cases 10 plus years to get there, but we have to start. This is what we need you to do. Then we put a contractual obligation where we gave them a timeline to be able to do that. I meet with our suppliers on a bi-monthly basis, and we always talk about sustainability. We talk about different aspects of sustainability. So today, when we look at where we're at, fast forward a couple of years later, we have these addendums in place, contract obligations. But August of this year, this 2025, we're at a point where we're going to really be evaluating where our suppliers are on their journey. Mm-hmm. And at a minimum, we need suppliers to be able to tell us, okay, I started my baseline in 2022, maybe for data, and 2030, I want to be X% lower in my emissions on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and these are the areas that I'm going to be focused on. At a minimum, we need that. But even better would be helping us better understand what are those actions you're going to take too, and build confidence in that. But that's what we're trying to do with sustainability. And if I can share one more thing, Angela, the butterfly effect. Have you heard about the butterfly effect?
I have heard about the butterfly effect.
Okay.
Definitely.
So the butterfly effect basically says that you start in one system, a localized system, and then you make a small change. So in a small change, that change you're making and the impact that has, the effect it has on the larger ecosystem. So we all have to start with this small change, and then that will impact the larger ecosystem. I won't mention the supplier, but there is a great National Geographic documentary on the butterfly effect and what this specific supplier did in their ecosystem to drive sustainability. So if anybody's interested, just Google butterfly effect, National Geographic, probably be the first one that comes up.
That is awesome. And can I just say, it's really inspiring how you guys have evaluated these different tiers. Well, you mentioned 1, 2, and 3, and then analyzing that 80% of the footprint that you guys leave behind is based off of the partners that you do business with, the ancillary areas of the organization. But as somebody that is a mother, and I think about my kids and my kids' kids and what their reality looks like, it's amazing to me how this one small butterfly effect can impact their generations. And that truly is where it kind of comes all the way around for me, at least. And like I said, it is amazing to see how this shift has happened at the supplier level, but also the educational part of it. This is a journey. This is not a race. This is a marathon, and this is going to be iterations of what we value success around, and leaning in with that understanding within your supplier base. But with that, I'm also super excited because we're talking about machine learning and AI and the sustainability. We have been inspired as part of our Leaders Unfiltered podcast to have one AI generated question in each episode. And you better believe that it had something to do with sustainability. We asked our friend, the good old Chat GPT, to go ahead and give us a question. We let them know that we were going to be interviewing you today, and we gave them a basis of what we wanted the episode to be about. So this is the quote unquote chat GPT AI generated question that's spit out for you, Pratik. Pratik, comma, they even knew your name. There we go. Pratik, as companies like Mastercard strive to innovate in sustainability, what emerging technologies or practices do you see having the biggest impact on environmental goals?
Yeah. So this isn't just environmental goals, but I'll relate it back to environmental goals. That when you have anything that you're trying to solve a problem for, it starts with awareness. That awareness leads to an understanding, and that understanding leads to an action. So how I would relate it back to sustainability is first that awareness component. So on the awareness component, I kind of alluded to it a little bit when I talked about scope one. Mm-hmm. You gotta understand, in my mind, this is me talking, right? Not necessarily Mastercard, but it's more about because we're all the sum of our life experiences. And I was fortunate about 15 years ago, if you can believe it, when I was at Energizer, and we were talking about product lifecycle management. And what that means is when you are looking at a product, you're not just talking about what does it take to make the product and maybe that element as it relates to the carbon emissions that exist in making the product, but it's the overall life cycle of what happens, the disposal of that product. Of course, yeah. Even to get to that product, the raw materials involved to produce that product and the emissions around that. And so that awareness piece, I would love to see more innovation around being able to truly have an understanding of what that footprint is for that product life cycle. If I can share, I'll share two examples with you to really bring this to home. I remember 15 years ago when I was first taught this, we were looking at it in terms of what is better for the environment after you wash your hands, to use one of those air dryers or a paper towel, assuming that the paper towel is biodegradable too.
I would assume the paper towel. I would go the paper towel route. It's biodegradable. It's a cost there. It definitely doesn't need as much energy storage or utilization, and it's also biodegradable. So after a finite period of time, it's hopefully gone much faster than what would be to dispose of actually the machines and the units within that machine. That's my guess.
Yeah, I don't think there is necessarily a right or wrong answer until you truly understand all the inputs. But but what they were trying to say is we should kind of understand that element. So that's the first thing I say is awareness around product life cycle. Because then that will help us. Because the other example I'll use is we see these wind farms coming up everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think about that and I'm like, oh my God, is that truly driving a long-term sustainable solution? Because at the sacrifice of those wind farms, I have to think that is impacting how much you're farming, which, had you not been doing that. And then also, how does that impact irrigation, where those wind farms are being built? Are the farmers thinking about how to route the water back? I mean, water finds its way, but at the same time, how is it overall disturbing the biodiversity that exists in that ecosystem that they're too? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, because the other thing you have to think about is, okay, you generated the power, you got to store the power. You're not just using the power right away. This is the engineering.
But, it's so true though, and like if I could put a synopsis on your take of sustainability overall, and I don't mean to oversimplify it because it really is a complex subject matter, but it is the acute awareness of the entire life cycle of your service offering, and then secondarily to that, it's kind of bringing that ride through it, right? The iterations of what we can do to minimize it through this journey, this holistic journey that we're bringing in. So, I mean, fascinating stuff. And kudos to you and the Mastercard team to really prioritizing this and embedding it at so many different levels within the organization. And I'm sure it started within the stakeholder alignment and some of, the initial decisions that were made from the top down. I was hoping, as we're wrapping up today's show, I wanted to just kind of ask you one pointed question. And if you can share with us a success story, speaking of stakeholder alignment, where you actually had to do the buy-in. And you don't have to share specifics or even within like what organization you were with. Don't need to know that. But so much of what y'all do, and I think, let's face it, what any a professional is facing is the stakeholder alignment or the stakeholder buy-in. But can you share a success story where you've had to secure stakeholder buy-in, let's say not from the top down, but from the bottom up to drive through impactful change?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to talk about one that started about a year and a half ago. And now we're at the point where we're going to get optimized value from it holistically across the world, but it started in one region. So this one business had challenges with the talent that they needed to get. And as a result of that, it was impacting their ability because the talent was ultimately also supporting our customers as well. And so as a result, it was impacting our brand, our reputation with those customers, and the ability to be able to have the confidence and trust in those customers to continue to leverage us where we can leverage also our extension of our company through this talent base out there. And so we took first we just kind of looked at our existing supply base and just did one of those definition of insanity where you try to do something over and over again, hoping to get a different result, which was to talk with different suppliers and to like see, okay, could you provide the talent? Could you provide the talent? No, that doesn't happen. You need to get to the root cause. And the root cause was all the pain points that the business was having. And aligning with them that, hey, we need to do a much more holistic view of what we need to be able to drive the value for our customers. And it's not just about the talent itself. It's maybe also around the level of like how much the supplier has built an understanding in that talent so they can be ready day one as well. We call it an academy type of approach. And it also has to do with background checks and ensuring that those are completed in a timely manner, because as you can imagine, in your industry, you face those challenges as well on that side.
Can I skip like the baying number? No.
Yeah.
Taking that part.
but like that's a few examples, but we had about 8 or 9 pain points that we were trying to address. And then rallying the entire world around this so that we can get commonality. There's common ground across these pain points, across all these different areas, getting their support. And then when we got their support, then we went to our CFO level for that group, and then they were on board, and they said, "Oh, talk to the engineering lead." So we talked to the engineering lead, and before you know it, we have another unit that is associated with the same business unit this group is, that also wants to look at this, which allows us to consolidate our supply base, drive the value that the customers are looking for, and be able to address all these different pain points. That's the type of rallying cry that truly drives sustainable value.
Yes, I love it. And that's actually utilizing, what I think is almost, maybe somebody like you can get down to calculating this, but reputational risk, right? And truly what that can mean.
Yes.
And taking something like that was an environmental impact, or let's call it an external impact, and driving that change all the way through. Awesome. Love it. Okay. So we are wrapping up today's episode, and I want to leave you with this, Pratik. I'd love for you to just, if you could have one takeaway for the listeners today, what would that mean? I'm listening to you and I'm inspired by so many different facets of what you guys are doing, but what would be that one takeaway that you'd hope to inspire some of the listeners on the Leaders Unfiltered show?
Yeah, so I would just say do not take no for an answer in general, because it's all about building the story and being able to leverage data to tell that story that helps your businesses, your stakeholders to truly understand the value proposition of what you're trying to drive. Because a no is from a point in time. It's not necessarily looking at holistically the data that you might be thinking about. So don't take no for an answer, but instead try to be able to be a good storyteller to drive that influence so that that business sees that value. And then I think that will drive optimization and better for everybody.
Yes. And utilizing data as that tool in your tool belt to drive that story home. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show, all the way from St. Louis. Pratik, thank you. You are truly an inspiring individual. I feel like every time I talk with you, like my IQ just, okay, kind of, we're talking about small iterative change. This is what happens. This is the Pratik effect. So sincerely want to thank you for joining in, and thank you to our listeners as well, wherever you're tuning in from. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of Leaders Unfiltered.